good to go.
All right, we're going to convene the planning and zoning commission meeting here in Dune Beach, Delaware. The agenda has been posted, and one of the draft was posted a couple days ago, and the notice has been done properly. So we'll open up the meeting, and first we'll do a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll do a roll call. Let's see here. Mike Farmer, chair, I'm obviously here. Dave Lyons is here. Mark Norquist is here. Jimmy O'Connor is here. Dale Cook, right? Over Nice. Perfect. We're going to need to get I know Jimmy wants to say something, but we're going to do that after the minutes. So we're going to adopt the agenda for the day. A motion to adopt the agenda. So moved. All right. One, second. Second. Steve. All in favor, aye. Aye. I don't see any nays. So, yeah. All right. And we have two sets of meeting minutes. The ones from when I was not here when Dave Lyons ran the meeting on the polls, the 5G polls. And then you did receive those minutes. So we should take a vote for that because I can't vote. That's why I wanted Jimmy before he stands up Paul to vote on that, as well as, so I want to vote on those minutes first. You saw them, or is there a motion to adopt to approve those minutes? So moved. All right. Neil, and second. All right, Mark, and vote for it. I'll abstain. Everybody, yes. Okay, and then the second one will be the minutes from the last week we had on rezoning, and I said those. For a motion to approve the minutes. Yeah, all right. Second on that. All right, Jimmy. Any discussion, seeing none, and then all in favor? Aye. All right, good. All right. So, get the approval meeting minutes before we get into the agenda. We'll be talking about the parking requirements. I think Jimmy O'Connor will word for a minute.
It's something my attention, and I've been advised that I should recuse myself with conflict of interest, possibly, and especially. So I will use myself from participating in the meeting, participating in the vote.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Because I'm in a restaurant.
Yeah, it's a residential wording consistency, but because of the second one, and we could speak about that, but I think Jimmy, we have one, so.
Oh, you're talking about that when you go to my office.
There you go. Perfect.
Gentlemen, have fun. Thank you.
All right. Got that check box. So now we're going to move into discussion among the planning and zoning members about the draft ordinance. There are two things we're going to do. We're going to talk about just the inconsistency between the text in the code and table 2, and Jim will brief us on that. As far as inconsistency in the wording, and I guess we can just discuss that real quickly now. We'll do one at a time. So Jim, like, needs now will give us some background on that.
Okay, item number 1 is to discuss and possibly change a conflict that we found in the code that specified in the writing in the actual narrative section that it was one parking spaces for 3 residential beds. That actually was recommended by the town commission, by the town planning commission, I believe in 2012, to change it to 4 bedrooms and one would require 1 parking space, which is consistent with what is in table 2. And for every 2 additional parking spaces, for the the additional 2 bedrooms, it would be 1 parking space. So, for example, if you had 5 bedrooms, you would be required to have 2 parking spaces. Now, this is the way the town has been interpreting this from I believe since 2012. So what we recommending is that the language be changed in the ordinance. So that the 185 zoning is consistent with table 2, which would bring us consistent with our current interpretation of the code.
Yeah, so, it's, yeah, go ahead, now, this is discussion.
So it was originally 2 parking spaces for the first 3 bedrooms.
That is correct.
And in 2012, they changed it to every 2 parking spaces for every 4 bedrooms.
I think it was, quite frankly, I think it was an oversight.
Yeah, but I mean, it was changed,
It was changed to go to 1 parking space.
when they did the 2 sections didn't match.
Yes, they did match.
So all we're changing from 3 to 4.
This is a word action. Yes.
We're not really changing, we're just changing.
It's not table 2, table 2 is right, it's just the.
Table 2 is correct.
Table 2 is right, it's just the.
Yes, the narrative in there, in the 185 section.
So that's basically simple, like, you know, I think that when we get to, you know, we should probably, we should do both of them at the same time.
That is up to you, whether you want to move on this now or wait for public comment.
This way, let's do public comment for both. What we'll do is we'll discuss that when we just finish discussion on outdoor rendering, usually the discussion on table 2 versus the text. We basically, what I'm thinking we're looking at is what Jim says, to get the table 2 working into the text now. And then we'll go to item number 2, discuss that, and we'll do a public hearing on both of them, and then close it out, since that's the way the agenda. That's okay. All right. So let's go around the, any other comments, they all on that?
On the 3 or 4?
Yeah.
No. If I could, I would vote yes, but I wouldn't yes, that.
Thank you. All right, no comment today. Okay. So seeing none, we'll go to item 2. This is just amongst planning and zoning commissioners, where we're going to talk about the draft ordinance that was posted to amend the chapter 185 of zoning to change all or some of the zoning districts, except for PRB1 and PRB3 zoning districts to allow restaurants with 4,000 square feet or less assigned for catering use to have no off-street parking requirements for restaurants. More than 4,000 assigned shall have 1 space for each 200 square feet assigned for catering use over 4,000 square feet, rounded up, including open deck. So that situation is the draft ordinance, if we all have it in front of us, that's what the wording says. So what's up in the air for us in this, because we have total latitude, that's planning to make a recommendation with a different number in there and different zoning districts. But I looked at, we had a little bit of research done on neighboring towns, and the neighboring town research found that there's we're different than Rehoboth. In fact, the Rehoboth, the way they do it is they have 10,000 square feet gross floor area in their section 270-35D. It says less than 10,000 square feet gross floor area exclusive of underground parking areas where no spaces are required. Lewis has a similar thing. It's sort of in the kind of town center district, but Lewis is has 0 under their 197-61E. Ours requires 19 if you went over with the same type of restaurant. We would need 19 spaces. And then Bethany would need 0. So basically, we're at a competitive disadvantage, in my opinion, and others can argue it differently. But you might want to copycat all the neighboring towns, but maybe the ordinance again from us might bring us in line with with that. That's what we'll discuss with the commissioner, and Jim will help us facilitate the discussion. Bill will add in, also Bill, town manager, helper, and we will conclude our discussion, and then we'll open it up for our public hearing on both those items that were posted. So, anyone want to say anything? You want to just go around the room, or how do you guys, go ahead, Bill, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I guess.
I think,
Wherever I go.
we're good, let's hear it.
You know, you talk about Rehoboth and Lewis and Bethany.
Yeah.
Every one of them have groups of parking spaces, public parking spaces in the heart of their town. Rehoboth has hundreds of them. Bethany has hundreds of them in the center of their town, where we're talking about now, the center of it. And so I don't think we can compare us to, especially Bethany and Rehoboth, and in a way to Lewis, because they have not as many as the other ones. They have significant, matter of fact, they just leased out part of the bank parking lot for added public parking in the middle of their town. So I think it's unfair to compare it to that. I think it's unfair, personal opinion, and without a lot of knowledge. I think it's unfair to not address all the business districts and only address one. I think we're setting the town up for lawsuits from the other ones. I think because the first thing they're going to say is you guys aren't experts, you didn't have a real expert give you advice on this, and you just winged it on one area, one zoning area. And I think we have a problem with that. I think probably it would have been best if this been looked at by the Board of Adjustment first, doesn't appeal to the Board of Adjustment. I like the idea of this restaurant. I like the idea of improving the upgrade of restaurants and businesses in the town, and I think it's going to appeal to a whole different set of patrons. But I think we need to do it right, and I'm afraid that we're setting the town up for a problem if we change it now.
Thank you, Dale. Dave?
The other question I had for the group is just kind of discussion on the 4,000 square feet. What was the logic around that?
Well, Jim, I don't know if you can.
It came up with a discussion item that was recommended, I believe, in the minutes of the meeting, that one of the commissioners recommended to consider 4,000. Just remember, you all are not locked into any kind of, I guess, a square foot requirement. It's up to you all to make the recommendation as we do that. I would also like to comment that you as commissioners have the opportunity to look at other districts. At the beginning, the other districts, with the exception of the PRB one and PRB three zoning issues. So you can discuss that and look at some of the time.
Yes, so, and what we do is put like a whereas clause, in RB2, you know, the lots are typically 5,000 square feet, and then RB1, and maybe in 3, they might be larger, lots. So, the RB2 seems to be the area where the 4,000 might make sense. But we, you know, look later down the road, the RB1 or 3, or we can be consistent with the table as it is now. Table 2 on page, you can see the numbers itself. It's, you go down to where it says restaurant parking requirements, like the third page, but it says restaurant parking requirements on the column, and you just go over, and you'll notice that RB, you know, 1, 2, and 3 all have the same, you know, and before all have the same. So if that's a big concern, I think this across the home today, you know, maybe we, you know, I was thinking we would defer 1 and 3 for further study, and 4, you know, just keep sending the RB 1, 2, 3 today, 4,000.
I can't interrupt if you don't mind. I know you were recommending. I've got one final thing.
Go ahead.
that will say. I tried to get a printout of the hard copy of the ordinances the other day at town hall. They didn't have it. They weren't ready.
Yeah.
And I know I got a copy from you, but the public wasn't able to see this. And I know we've been told, or you told me that we've been told that the ordinance doesn't have to be posted.
That's what the council, that's what
I think that's unfair. I think the public should be able to see proposed ordinance long before we bring it up here at this meeting.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
that's a good point. No, that is a definite, valid point, that we need to consider as we post these things, it's not required, we'll try to get them done faster. That's, on our backs, and my back as the chair, and, us trying to get that on there sooner. And we'll definitely take that into consideration when we're looking at dates for meetings versus keeping the ordinance done, in the future. Yeah, it's a very good point. I agree with that. Yeah.
If you could, we've had some comments from the public about speaking into the mics and speaking clearly, so we do make sure you would, because they're having a hard time hearing you on the Zoom.
I have a hard time hearing me.
Everybody with the exception of Jim, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Bill. All right, so Dale, point well taken, and I don't think anybody would disagree, especially with that person as well. But as far as proper proceeding, we minimize by our council that we've done everything correctly during this meeting. Dave, anything else?
The only other thing I wanted to bring up, Mike, was that there were 2 public comments. So I don't know, we'll want to just discuss them. Because,
Sure, just, why don't you want to say that for the public comment section?
I would just say, read it in whatever the comments when we get to the contract.
We'll have Dave, when we open up the public hearing, we'll have Dave speak first. Just talk about what we received, just read each word. Anything else, Dave?
No, just wanted to say that one of the discussion.
So you got two in favor, is that what you had?
Basically, yes, 2 in favor with some thoughts.
Some editorial on it.
editorial on it, but 2 in favor.
All right, so we got Mark and Howard.
Walking around the town, looking at different restaurants, whatever. I see the 4,000 square feet. In my opinion, not being a restaurant owner, I have a vested interest. We'll easily make a motion to do up to 5,000. I know some people are going to probably say, well, whatever. The only part I think should be required is handicap. And that should be based on ADA and the state level. You have to have a handicap already. But you look at some of these places, they've got 4 spots, 10 spots. Does that really make a difference? Parking lots, don't park in the street. That's correctly told, whatever, they get a ticket, they do it pretty much walking down the street. You try to remove it, and take it over. Uber takes it. The parking lots right now are being used for seating, it's helping out to make up for the COVID. It's also bringing the people in town. I look at these outside seating, we're filled all the time. I'm not going to mention any particular restaurant because I don't think that's what we should do it. But other than that, I think parking lots are more of a hazard than a helpful thing because they got to pull in out that people walking into walking town. That's just my opinion. We did something we tried for a year. We don't have to do it permanently like anything else. Do it for all we have out there, see what we did 2 years ago. We shot it, do it that way against it, and look how well it worked. So, I mean, you got to try, you have to be open to try something. And that's just, that's where I'm at.
All right, yeah, I think that with the way that the, code's written and, Bethany and Lewis, they're in our districts or counts in our districts, which is, our Route 1, which also, in my opinion, is RB2-ish. Certainly some parking relief to assure competitiveness and to the ability for the town to attract some different new restaurants and things. Should maybe a good thing, like Mark said, we could always go back and do things and change things. And then I agree with the parking lot issue that as far as it might attract things that you might not want going on. So in this day and age, especially in Dewey Beach, we're all walking. A lot of us are just walking to go get something to eat or for Uber or whatever, in the John trolleys and stuff. So cars are kind of, in my opinion, like in the way. And the town also, in the long-term future, if money becomes available, can also look at getting a right of way back and doing things like been done on Lake Van Dyke and different kinds of parking arrangements to maximize, the parking. That's long-term, distant future. So I think that the ability to attract businesses and the fact that there's some additional housing available and possibly on the way as things change, they can become good. So happy to be part of the process. That's people just gonna ask, why do you do this to yourself on the weekend? And I think that's because we want to try to shape the future of our towns where we're going to live and or hang out or vacation time or time. So I look forward to the further discussion on this, and I'm going to pass at this point. See if Jim or Bill wants to say anything before we put it up to public hearing.
I think we should have.
Then we're going back to.
Anybody, if you guys want to say anything before?
After the public
Yeah,
hearing.
we'll go back and see if we want to do more than this right. So, so first thing I want to do is I want to open the public hearing. We'll keep the discussion about planning and zoning commission open for dialogue. And before we, first thing I want to do is have Dave read in what we received on email. We captured everything. If we missed somebody, sorry. But go ahead, Dave, with what we think we have.
Okay, so the first is a letter from Carol Everhart, who is the president and CEO of the Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. She writes, says, I'm unable to attend the December 18th, 2021 hearing. Please read into the record the following statement regarding the draft ordinance to amend Chapter 185 zoning. To provide consistency and fairness, we ask that you consider granting the square footage patron allowance that is 4,000 square feet or less to require no off-street parking. She writes, thank you for your efforts on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Dave.
The other comment I have is from David Moskowitz. I guess I'll read the whole email and then we'll go. On Saturday, you will be considering relaxing the parking space requirements for restaurants. The goal would be to approve the new restaurant, Starboard Claw, and encourage outdoor dining, which everyone in town, including myself, is excited about. However, what's proposed could have unintended consequences. Currently, a restaurant does not have a parking requirement unless it's more than 2,000 square feet for patron use. In those cases, the parking requirement applies from 0 square feet, creating a small business cliff. The proposed change would double that requirement to 4,000 square feet, but start the parking lot requirement at 4,000 square feet, removing the cliff. He gives an example. A 5,000 square foot patron use restaurant, the current code requires 25 spots. The proposed code will require 5 spots. At 5,000 square foot restaurant could easily be the equivalent of 10,000 square feet when kitchen and non-patron space is factored in. When those employees grab the block's on-street parking spots, where will the public and more importantly, the residents park? Rehoboth has been used as an example, but they have tons of public parking. Dewey does not. The current proposed language could lead to large unintended consequences, including smaller restaurants merging with their next door neighbors. The small business cliff has kept a number of small businesses in town. We want to keep the small businesses we love. Large businesses already have an advantage. If there's no parking requirement, what will happen to our small businesses in our town? Insufficient parking will severely undermine commerce and quality of life. We also want the code to encourage outdoor dining. Here's this alternative. Perhaps what makes sense is an incremental step which allows the project to go forward and encourages outdoor dining, but will avoid large-scale consolidation of small businesses. One idea I have that would accomplish what's needed is this. Restaurants with more than 3,000, parentheses, 2,000 square feet assigned for patron use shall have one space for each 200 square feet assigned for patron use, including the decking. The first 1,000 square feet of open decking shall not count towards this calculation.
Thank you, Dave. All right, so the public hearing on we're going to do 2 things. We'll just do the draft ordinance to fix the wording from the Jim.
We might want to ask if anybody wants to call in from Zoom or anybody else or try in the public.
Yeah, let me open this up first. Let me make sure I set where we're headed. So the public hearing, we're doing 2 things here. First thing we're going to talk about is the draft ordinance to fix the inconsistency in the wording. to duplicate in the text of the code, the table 2 wording on the residential parking. And then we'll talk about the parking in the RB2 area with the 4,000 square feet issue. So for now, let's focus on the public hearing and see if anybody wants to have any comments on the fixing the wording between the two. If we don't get any comments on that, we'll roll right to the 4,000 issue. Anyone in here want to talk about the wording? I see a gentleman there who wants to talk. You want to come up to the microphone and say your name?
This is Steve Spence. This is a accommodation matter. I would recommend that you make your recommendation back to the council by consolidating the changes into one ordinance, because you're talking about changing different subsections of the same actual ordinance or the same actual zoning code section. So I just recommend you consolidate them together when you send them back.
But it doesn't, I mean, it wouldn't matter legally either way though, because,
No,
okay.
well, and nor do we oppose it.
Okay.
Any of the clients I represent, we just thought it would be an efficient.
It would have
So
been.
you make changes that aren't, let's put it this way, the way it's drafted right now, it's a little confusing because the language related to parking for restaurants is in your draft ordinance fixing the parking for residential in the later subsection. Either change the way you present that, so you're just dealing with that one issue, or consolidate. That was the only.
Mr. Spence, I'm sorry. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I don't know whether I agree or disagree, but that's not the point. The point is, who today are you representing?
I've represented a number of business interests and Alex Pyries as a residential owner. I represent the Highway 1 Limited Partnership, and I represent Grotto Pizza. And this is odd, but one of the partners of my firm is also representing other parties. But my particular clients are Mr. Pyries, actually Mr. Snow, who's also here, Highway 1 Limited Partnership, and Grotto Pizza. That's all I had on that first.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spence. So, what do you think, Jim? Is there a preference for the town separate?
If that is your preference, you can close it or public comment on the residential parking requirements and take a vote, or you can go directly into the parking requirements for restaurants.
Okay.
In the RB2 district.
Yeah, we'll keep them together then. And we have anybody wants to comment from the Zoom or whatever?
You have Gary Carp, just came in the waiver.
All right, Gary, I don't see anybody else here wants to talk about the table inconsistency. So at that point, we're going to the Zoom folks. Gary, Mr. Gary.
Like he's connecting to audio. There he goes.
Gary Carp.
No,
Technology, we just left. Okay. So is there anyone else that wants to come through or?
that was it. I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. So we see no more desires to talk about the inconsistency wording. And at this point, we'll proceed on to the second item on the draft ordinance to amend Chapter 185 zoning to change all or some zoning districts except for PRB1 and PRB3 zoning districts to possibly allow restaurants with 4,000 square feet or less assigned for patron use to have no off-street parking requirements, where restaurants with more than 4,000 square feet assigned for patron shall have one space for each 200 square feet assigned for patron use over 4,000 square feet, rounded up, including open decking. So we're on the public hearing on that. And at this point, we're looking to the folks to discuss. It looks like we got Glenn.
We have somebody in Zoom first, though.
Yeah, hi, it's Gary Clark.
Gary Carp.
Oh, Gary. Okay, Gary. Good morning, Gary. Sorry about the technology blip, but you're here. Is your mic on?
Yeah, good morning. Are you prepared? Are you ready to speak about the 4,000 square feet? Or are you still talking about the wording?
Well, we thought when you were there, we were still talking about the inconsistency. Do you want to wait and come back on the 4,000?
Yes, that's what I prefer to speak.
Well, you know what? I guess, yeah, why don't you just go on the 4,000? We just opened that up. So why don't you just be the first person? Is that good?
You want me to talk about the 4,000 now?
Absolutely, yeah, that'll work because we thought you wanted to talk about the inconsistency. That's a pretty easy thing. So, yes, we did just, I just read what we're talking about and you're up.
All right, well, thank you. Good morning. I know it's not specifically around the Starboard Claw restaurant, but I do want to say that I continue to be supportive of the new restaurant. I am, however, opposed to the proposal to change the parking requirements. I think this will have a negative impact on the town. First of all, I think looking at just car parking without looking at a total mobility strategy for the town is the wrong approach. How can a car parking decision be made without looking at an overall strategy that would include car parking, bike and scooter parking, pedestrian walk areas, sidewalks, possibly car service pickup drop-off areas? If we provide less car parking, then we could potentially have more pedestrians. Does the town have the sidewalk infrastructure in place to support the additional foot traffic? If we provide less car parking, then we would have more bike usage potentially. Does the town have the bike infrastructure in place to support increased bike traffic and bike parking? So I think just reducing the requirements, the car parking requirements, without looking at a comprehensive approach, isn't right. A few comments about parking. The Rehoboth has been used as an example why parking shouldn't be required for restaurants of a certain size. In addition to significantly more side street parking, Rehoboth has hundreds of parking spaces on Rehoboth Avenue. Dewey has nothing comparable. I've mentioned in previous meetings that the Dewey Comprehensive Plan identifies several mobility issues, including the lack of parking in Dewey, and that there's no plan to address the problems. I don't see how a change can be made that would decrease the amount of parking in the town without a full comprehensive plan being developed. There's a couple, let me just quote a few excerpts out of the plan. Dewey struggles with parking management during the high season. It's important for Dewey Beach to have an effective parking management system, as inadequate parking could create a poor experience for visitors whom the town desires to have return to patronize local businesses. Also, parking availability is a consideration for businesses seeking new operating location. Many sidewalks are narrow, interrupted by utility poles. There's insufficient space in many sections of the sidewalk due to the number of pedestrians using them. One of the specific objectives states, develop a comprehensive parking strategy to address parking issues, specifically in the resort business districts. And it states the action is to be taken. The town should pursue funding for a comprehensive parking study. The town should consider increased parking capacity. So I think the CDP is clear that parking and total mobility strategy is needed. And then just lastly, if you are so inclined to accommodate a change in the code to reduce parking, I think there's a few questions that should be discussed by this team. How is the recommendation for 4,000 square foot threshold? How was that determined? What makes this the right number? Why shouldn't it be 3,000 or 5,000 or some other number? I haven't heard any data or statistics presented that supports a 4,000 square foot as the right threshold. And if this change was passed, would it be retroactive for other businesses with less than the square footage threshold that's determined? And if it is retroactive, what are the potential unintended consequences of that? What would these restaurants potentially do with these parking spaces that are no longer required? So I hope at a minimum, there's some discussion around these questions. So, again, I think it's a mistake to arbitrarily reduce parking requirements without further investigation to what the right threshold should be, and really feel the right approach is to do what the CDP suggests and develop a more comprehensive mobility plan. So thank you. I'll be interested in your discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Carp. Really appreciate it. What was your address again?
21 Bellevue, Unit 4.
That's what I thought. Okay, from last time. Okay.
Mike, would you mind if I made a quick comment?
Yeah, so Jim Deeds wants to make a quick comment. Go ahead, Jim.
It's come up several times that this zoning will only impact Starboard Claw. This is not geared for just one restaurant, even though there is a connection. But this is not a Starboard Claw requirement. It would impact other restaurants as well.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we're looking for additional comments. I think we have Mr. Glenn coming up.
Thank you, sir.
And you can tell us who you represent and all that, or.
I
whatever.
shall. Good morning, Chairman Harbour, members of the commission, Mr. Zolpo or Mr. Deeds. My name is Glenn Mandalis. I'm an attorney with Baird Mandalis Brockstead, and I do represent the Starboard Land Company. And as Mr. Deeds just said, this is not an application that's all about that particular restaurant application, but we were probably the impetus for your consideration of this ordinance. And we think it is a good one that's, it's a good one throughout the entire RB2 district. And that's why we preferred to go this route, a planning commission code amendment versus a Board of Adjustment avenue. We have filed an application with the Board of Adjustment to seek relief from the off-street parking requirements should we not be successful in a code amendment. But we think this is the better avenue because it allows you to look at this proposed change holistically in the town. It's one that we think's been needed for some time. As you know, Starboard Claw wants to create a new restaurant at the Hammerheads location. It's going to be a kind of a crab house with Starboard's iconic flair, and it's going to be a great addition to the town. But the reason it can't happen right now is because of the off-street parking requirement that Dewey Beach has. And I think it's the reason that the restaurant scene within Dewey Beach has not kept pace with some of the towns to your north and to your south. Dewey Beach has a lot to offer, to be certain, but as far as restaurant options at the higher end, it's been lagging behind those other beach towns. And I think it's because of this off-street parking requirement. All of our towns are different for sure, all of our beach towns. So I'm not suggesting that you should do this so you become more like Rehoboth or more like Lewis or more like Bethany Beach. Dewey is its own location and it should remain that way. So the off-street parking requirement in the RB2 district, and let me address just for a moment Mr. Cook's point about the RB2 district, and we should be looking at all the districts. I agree completely that you should give some attention to all the districts, but I don't agree that this, looking at just the RB2 district is going to create some avenue for legal challenge. The reason a municipality has different zoning districts is because you want to have different regulations in different areas of town. Different areas have different needs, and the RB2 corridor coming down Route 1 really is in and of itself its own kind of area, and it has demands and needs that are different than the resort residential districts near the bay and near the ocean. So I think it's okay to look at just a single zoning district for these sorts of changes. So in the so the off-street parking requirement in your code is found in section 185-35A6A. And it says there that all zoning districts except for the PRB1 and the PRB3 zoning districts, restaurants with 2,000 square feet or less assigned for patron use shall have no off-street parking requirements. Restaurants with more than 2,000 square feet assigned for patron use shall have one space for each 200 square feet assigned for patron use, including open decking. So that section has previously been interpreted to mean that up to 2,000 square feet, there's no off-street parking requirement. Once you go to 2,001 square feet of patron use, then that initial 2,000 square feet kicks in, and you've got to have those initial 10 spaces for that 2,000 square feet, and then anything in additional to 2,000. So at the outset, to go anything over 2,000 square feet, you're instantly hit with 10 off-street parking spaces. And that's quite an ask in a town of limited size for sure. So just the land mass available to create a restaurant with that much parking just isn't really available. We've had to put together 2 parcels just to do the restaurant we're trying to do at Starboard Claw. And, it makes it very, very demanding to create that sort of a space if you have this parking requirement. So you have the numbers as far as our restaurant goes. Starboard Claw is proposed to be 6,438 square feet. The first floor would have 1,891 square feet of patron use. The second floor would have 1,803 square feet of patron use. So there's about 3,700 square feet dedicated to patron use in starboard clause. So the ordinance, as it's written and proposed today, would accommodate what starboard clause is trying to do. Your ordinance is written at 4,000 square feet, not requiring off-street parking. And we're at just about 3,700 square feet. I did provide examples in a letter of the different towns to the north and south and how their code sections work, and why this restaurant wouldn't require off-street parking in their areas. And I agree, we are different in Dewey than the other towns. There is certain parking there, but I also think that one thing about Dewey is that it's very, very innovative, and where one thing happens, another thing pops up to fix it. There's an article I was looking at, and I'll submit it if anybody cares to read it. It says parking reform will save the city. It's a recent 2019 article, and it talks about how parking lots do create possibilities for safety issues, and how having the off-street parking requirements actually creates sprawl and other things. So it again is not specifically, this has some things that would not apply to Dewey for sure, but it's an article that's maybe worth looking at, because it does argue the point that doing away with some off-street parking requirements actually drive some other things within a municipality that are good for it. So Bill, Mr. Zolper, I'll just give you that if you submit it for the record. So in Lewis, they do have an off-street parking requirement of one parking space for 200 square feet assigned for patron use. But then there's an exception in 197-61D of the Lewis Code that says there's no off-street parking required for uses located within the town center historic, and cultural historic zoning districts. And those districts in Lewis are really the core districts of the town, just like Route 1 is really, the RB2 corridor is really the core downtown district for Dewey Beach.
Thank you, Glenn. That does correct my statement earlier. I did not mention that it was the exemption, the detail of that exemption. So thank you for the clarification on that.
Sure thing. Rehoboth Beach, less than 10,000 square feet of gross floor area, exclusive of underground parking. There's no spaces required. So Rehoboth changed some things about their restaurant size, but this no off-street parking requirement in Rehoboth has been there for at least 2 decades. They have not required off-street parking. Bethany Beach just has a flat, there will be no off-street parking requirement, and that's section 240 or 425-82. So again, I think that the reason perhaps that the restaurants are going to these other towns are because it's manageable from an off-street parking requirement. One of the things that we've realized is that, especially recently, given supply chain issues and the cost of construction materials, it's just very, very, very difficult to create a restaurant that will produce the revenue that it needs to produce and provide these off-street parking requirements in the spaces that are available. It's almost cost prohibitive given the off-street parking requirement that Dewey Beach currently has. The other thing we heard during the public hearings when we went through the rezoning process is that the intersection at Bellevue where Hammerheads is, it's creating a lot of safety concern, because there are those parking spaces right when you come off Route 1 and you're trying to park, and it's almost unmanageable. So I think that perhaps removing these off-street parking requirements will discourage some of the safety issues that we have in some of these intersections along Route 1. And then there's been concern that if you remove the off-street parking requirement in the RB2 district, we're going to see, it's going to be a drastic change, and cars aren't going to be able to find a place to park, and we're going to have all kinds of increased or newly created issues by removing this off-street parking requirement. But I guess my response is that we've seen what will happen if we remove the off-street parking requirement over the past 1.5 years during the pandemic, because House Bill 1 expanded that off-street parking requirement. House Bill 1 has allowed the outdoor dining to be extended to March 31, 2022. So we've seen for the last 1.5 years that a lot of these outdoor spaces that were parking areas have been converted to outdoor dining. And so if there was going to be, a real detrimental effect of removing off-street parking in the RB2 corridor, we would have seen it over the past 1.5 years. And for sure, there's a parking challenge in Dewey, but it didn't seem to be increased over the past 1.5 years because of the outdoor dining. So for all those reasons, I do encourage you to adopt the ordinance as it is, or at some other number wherever you think that spot falls. You're the planning experts who know your town better than anybody else. So, but I am supportive certainly at 4,000 because that takes care of my client at 3,700 square feet. But I do think it makes sense throughout the entire RB2 corridor. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, I have no questions. Anyone? All right, see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any more comments from in the room? Looks like Mr. Spence wants to talk. If you want to come up to the microphone again.
Again, Stephen Spence, I'm an attorney representing Grotto Pizza and Highway 1 Limited Partnership, Alexander Pires and John Snow. The last two individuals are both involved with Highway 1 Limited Partnership, but they're also property owners and residents in Dewey. We support the increase of the exemption, if you will, for patron area to at least 4,000. And actually, we would be happier even, and I say we, Grotto Pizza and Highway 1 would be happier even at 5,000. One thing one comment I was going to make is to one of the other public comments is that I think the comprehensive plan discussion that was cited, and it was important to mention it, but I think it was primarily for the town to try to figure out what it's going to do with its parking spaces, not necessarily for private property owners as to what they have to do with their parking spaces. I think the town constantly has to think about how to maximize the available public parking. And I think that's what comprehensive plans are about in terms of that, or were about in connection with that subject. But having said that, using Grotto as one example, and if you think about it, Highway 1 and Grotto, and before the expansion of patron areas into the outside, Starboard, were three of the businesses that actually had any parking available. If you think about it, Grotto's parking lot's across the street from the restaurant behind what was many years ago a law office that I used to occupy. When Grotto and Jeff Gosnier in particular, who I dealt with on this question, and asked him what he thought I should say, he said the practical problem is that almost no one uses our parking lot for anything other than coming in there, parking, and going to the beach. They don't actually park there to come to Grotto Pizza Restaurant. They come there because it's a free parking spot. That has historically been the case for us at both the Ivy location and North Beach. Until we started to regulate them, people would just show up there, park their cars, and go to the beach and not really use them for the purpose of using our facilities. Now, we've controlled that at the Rusty Rudder because we charge an access fee that you can either choose to spend the $10, if you will, in the facility and get it back, or to spend the $10 to park there. We try to discourage people from doing that, but that's how we started to try to control it. And I think coming 2022, I think we're going to make another improvement to our parking facilities by actually making them facilities you have to pay to get into and get out of. Primarily to protect against what some of the things that have occurred, particularly in late night Dewey, which is people coming in from out of town and deciding to get into fights and doing stupid stuff without actually even being patrons of our facilities. But with that said, Grotto's view was, one other view that I've had from them in particular was that a lot of the facilities that are in Dewey that are restaurant facilities are old, and the cost of maintaining the structures, and in many cases maintaining quote unquote grandfathered status because they happen to be larger than 2,000 square feet of patron area, causes them to get older and not be capital improved or reconstructed in a way that would be more efficient, because you can't do it because you don't even have the land area to provide the parking. And you, in many cases, you don't want to lose your grandfather's status, and that has its own set of ramifications. But if you're just trying to capital improve a location, if you're trying to build something that's more than 2,000 square feet of patron area, as a practical matter on RB2 district, you can't do it because there is no place except for my clients ultimately and Starboard. And so we think the time has come for that requirement to be increased, so that you were encouraged to make capital improvements. and not have to worry quite as much about how much parking space we have to supply. And so that's why we support the effort to increase this area. We would, as I said, from our clients, they would recommend anyway the 5,000 square foot. But having said that, we support it at some level to get increased.
Thank you, Mr. Spence. All right, looking for any more comments on that before we close the public hearing and move to our deliberation, discussion, and possible ordinance recommendation. See none. All right, so anybody online? Nobody. All right, so we're going to close the public hearing, and we will now begin discussion of both the items. I believe my preference is going to be to blend both of these into one ordinance and discuss it that way, unless I see Jim having any heartburn over that.
I think since we have two ordinances.
Keep it to, okay, we'll keep it to, that'll be simple.
Commissioners may choose to do that,
All right.
or we'll talk to council before the next meeting,
Yeah.
whatever the recommendations
Okay.
may be.
So we'll keep it at 2, and then they can do what they want when they move forward if we make a recommendation. So the first one that's on the table is we'll be looking for a discussion and possibly a motion to we'll direct our attorney to make up the ordinance to follow the table 2 wording and put that into the code wording, code language, written wording to be consistent. So do we, I have no comment myself. Any comments before, or we got a motion for an ordinance, a motion for that?
I don't have any comment. I make a motion that we adopt the change. I think it's more administrative than substantial, so I think we should move forward and adopt it.
All right, second on that, or second the motion? Second, Joe Cook. Okay, any discussion on that? I have none, I see none. Vote, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
That's a unanimous vote. We'll go by names on the next one, but so this one was a unanimous, all passed. All right, now, this is the discussion and possible vote to make a recommendation about draft ordinance to amend chapter 185 zoning to change all or some of the zoning districts except for PRB1 and PRB3 zoning districts to possibly allow restaurants with 4,000 square feet or less assigned for patron use to have no off-street parking requirements, where restaurants with more than 4,000 or whatever number you decide assigned for patron use shall have one space for each 200 square feet assigned for patron use over 4,000 square feet, rounded up. And that's all written into the ordinance, draft ordinance that was posted that you have in front of you. So I guess we're on a discussion or looking for a motion to adopt the ordinance in whatever fashion or that you would like to see and recommend that to the commissioner. So discussion.
Is it still open to
Yeah.
go up?
Yeah, you can,
Okay.
you can say, something like, hey, this ordinance right here that's in front of us, I'd like to do it this way with this number and see if we can get it passed. And that'll be like the process.
Again, I'd like to make the motion if we can move up to 5,000.
All right, so Mark Nordquist, motion to use 5,000 and then just insert 5,000 as written. Is that your motion? All right, and looking for a second on that. Am I allowed to second it?
Not as a chair.
Not as a chair. Yeah, okay. So we got 5,000 on the table now. We can't really discuss it until we have a second. No second?
I believe you can second it for discussion.
Yeah, second for
I'll
discussion.
second it for discussion.
Yeah,
You can
so second for discussion. Yeah.
because I think
Okay, so we have Mark,
No.
to be Dave Lyons, second, and now discuss. Now's when we can really play around with it here. Dale, would you like to talk about this at all? You don't have to. You can just vote it down if you don't like it.
I would definitely be against 5,000 square feet. I want a change in it. I want to up it, but I couldn't go over 2,000 square feet. 3,000 square feet. Yeah, meaning I want a change that lowers the number of parking spaces required. I think I've been persuaded by the fact that in the last year and a half, I've watched almost no parking spaces exist. And there was no hue and cry by the public that they were upset. But I think, number one, like I say, I think it needs to be done in all the districts, all the business districts. And I think starting at 4,000 square feet to requiring parking is too much.
All right,
I would be against it at 5,000.
thank you, Dale. Anything else?
No.
All right, Dave?
So I think the world's changed since COVID with outdoor dining. And I think it's going to become part of our culture. You know, it's very much what goes on in Europe. You're going to see it here. It's not going to go away. So I think embracing it, supporting businesses, and as a small business owner myself, it is hard to put something together unless you have some kind of a mass of a business, and parking is a big piece of it. So I'm in favor of making the change to the ordinance. As I said, I'm not sure 5,000 or 4,000. I probably still need to hear the rest of the conversation about why 5,000 versus 4.
Okay.
But I do think there's probably something to be said about perhaps taking a look at Dale's point, looking at the parking and perhaps how we move people through the city as a whole, right, on bikes or walking or whatever. But I think that's a longer term issue and something that we should probably address. But I think this is in front of us today, and I think it's important for the city to continue to move on this.
Thank you, Dave. Mark?
Yeah, and I believe we need to do a lot more research before we decide it. But also, if we were to, this HB1, I believe it is, does the outside seating.
Yeah.
If that becomes square footage, we've already upped the square footage of the restaurant from where it is. Are they grandfathered in at what they existing? Let's say one of the restaurants.
Say that over again.
Let's say if HB1 allows the outside seating, now you've increased your square footage, or is it just the building? Because if you use that parking area as patron, now you've upped your square footage. So automatically you may have to add 10 more parking spots, or are you grandfathered in? Where are you going to get 10 parking spots? How many restaurants have 10, with the exception of a few of them here? Some of them have 4, some of them have 10. If you've got 300 people in your restaurant, you got 10 parking spaces. How'd they all get there? They didn't all come in cars. But again, there's positives and negatives to everything, but we have, do we try it out and again, do some more research? I can't tell you how big each restaurant is. Does the bar space where the bartender stands, does that count as square footage? Does the kitchen count as square footage? There's a lot of things we need to look at. I was just thinking about the outside seating and how it would affect the people if beyond March this goes through. Do we all of a sudden say, now you got to have more parking? I don't know the legalities of it. It's just me looking at it as an outside person with no vested interest.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Dale?
Well, right now, patron area is the square footage that is evaluates the size of the restaurant for parking.
Right.
Not the kitchens, not the storage areas, not the,
Just a clarification
yeah.
for myself and everybody else.
So I'm going to support the 5,000. I believe that businesses need all the help they can get, and that this town is more focused around walking where you go. And Uber has, and not just Uber, but the ride has come along. We're moving forward in positive directions. House Bill 1 has proven that you can take parking spots away. I don't like any parking lots, actually, myself personally, but that's not on the table to discuss right now. We're discussing a 5,000 patron area with no parking. And I think that that's good recommendation for an ordinance to the commissioners. I fully believe in it myself. And I think at this point, we should go ahead and take a vote and see where we're at on that.
I have one more question. How many
Sure.
parking spaces differ between 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 4,000? What's the difference?
Well, you'd have to do the math on it. I think that Glenn had a calculation. As soon as you go over 2001, you're at 10 plus 1. Yeah. So 11 and so forth. So yeah, it really adds up quickly. And those parking spaces are 19, I think it's, if I'm mistaken, 19 by 8. And, that's 19 by 9. These are like smaller lots, and there's just not the room. And, we tried, we can always go back and I agree that if the town can get some funding, we look at a comprehensive parking plan, and that's really a legitimate concern for the town. they got to look at their priorities. I'm sure they got a whole list of priorities, which one is going to make the mark, and look for grant money and things like that. And if it comes available, study it, get some volunteers in town to help out with the consultant, and we move forward on that. But I think we go ahead and let's conclude and see where we're at on this ordinance with the 5,000 square foot as Mark had proposed. Any further discussion?
And that would be, if we went to 5,000 and then later came back and said, hey, that's too much. Then we've got, I'm sorry, who's they?
Yeah.
I mean, if we went and did a study, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
we realized that 5,000 was too much, really 4,000 was the right number. We've already granted exceptions at the 5,000 mark. We're set a plan. Can't take it away.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
they'd be
So we're
grandfathered.
basically setting my favorite, setting a precedent at the 5,000. So as opposed to something, we could always go up if we wanted to. I mean, I think the 4,000 is good relief. It seems like we have that support from the public, at least at the 4,000 level, to go ahead and at least move forward. It kind of addresses Dale's comments about maybe it's too much. It doesn't, it's kind of to me, it's a compromise between 5,000, maybe Dale's 3,000. If we just go with the ordinance as written that we published today, with the thought that we can revisit that. That's my only.
Yeah, I don't
Mike,
feel.
I have a procedural question.
Yes, sir.
Just, I could vote for it. I can count votes too, so I see the way things are leaning, but I could go for 4,000 square feet. But do we lose a quorum? Do we have a quorum?
No, we have a quorum.
We still have a
with
quorum?
with the 4, we have the quorum. We're good there. So if you can go with the 4,000, Mark wants to go with 4. The reason I think the 5,000 also, gives a little more flexibility going forward. But if this does get to studying later, and we come back and look at RB 1, 2, and 3 comprehensively, like Dave said, maybe it gets bumped up a little bit. If that's the way we might go, this is what we posted. It might be cleaner with the 4, and we got the 4 votes. We have a quorum, even if we need a majority of the quorum. So, Mark, are you anyone want to go for the 5,000 vote, or you want to just anyone want to revise it?
You've got a motion for 5,000 square feet on the floor. Unless you all can get Mark to agree to amend that.
We got to
motion.
vote.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mark, you want to stick with the 5 and then try it and then go back down to 4?
Yeah, I think we should move up to 5. I mean,
Okay.
my feeling is we're not really attracting any more business to town.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to open a restaurant and you have to turn around and have these parking spaces, where are they going to come from? There's no land left.
Yeah.
To do it, really. Are you gonna let them use your 50 by 100 square foot lot that's worth 500,000 for a parking lot?
Yeah.
Mark, I would hope that you would change your motion back to 4, because I can pull myself together and vote for the 4,000. I couldn't vote for the 5,000.
Yeah, so I'm going to also encourage that. I mean, at this point, I can support the 4,000. So.
I support 4,000.
All right. So we got to revise it down to 4.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So if we got a revision down to 4, we need a second. Who seconded it? Dave, you had seconded it last time
I'll second the 4,000.
with the 4,000. Any discussion on the 4,000, or ready for vote? Dale, what's your vote on the 4,000?
When you go to the vote and you do that, you might want to give your reasons for why.
All right. Dale?
Yeah, I'm really not happy with it. You can tell from what I've said that I think, there's various reasons that I'm not happy, but I think it should be all business districts that we work with, and it should be an overall town plan that we're working with. I think we should have had more input from a professional that would tell us how we could adjust our parking in town with an overall plan. And I think we're inviting lawsuits from other business districts. But I'm willing to compromise at the 4,000, and I vote yes.
Thank you, Dale. Dale Cook with a yes. Dave Lyons.
So I'm also going to support with a yes, the 4,000 square foot. And I think it's a good movement forward. It doesn't solve all the problems, and it doesn't necessarily do the whole study, which I'm in favor of trying to do a whole study and kind of take a look at things at a broader level. But I think this is a good thing to do today, right now, where we are.
Thank you, Dave. I'll take that as a yes. And Mark Norquist.
I agree with what both you guys had to say, especially with legality part of it, because I don't know anything about that. But I'll go ahead with the 4,000, but I just want to make a note that I would prefer to see it go to 5. Just for now, based on what's going to happen this March if we continue with the outdoor seating, because are we going to have to force these people to create more parking?
Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to vote yes, and I feel the same as Mark, that maybe we might be a little lower than, but, based on what might happen in the future, but I know we're going to study, or at least we're not making a promise that it's going to study. There's a desire to study among some folks in town. And if money and priorities allow that with resources, maybe we can look at that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead with a yes on this with the 4,000, but I would have liked to have seen the 5,000 also. But we have a democratic process. And that's what it's all about. And I think it works very effectively. So thank you all. That motion passes. That'll be a recommendation that we will I'll get to town hall and work with Fred to make sure it's worded properly. Just review the words in here and we'll get the first one done. And that'll come up and, the town commissioners will take it from there. At this point, we'll go around the room for comments. Dale, any closing comments?
No
Dave?
further comments.
Mark?
No comment.
None from me. Jim, Mr. Zolfer? All right. So with that being said, we need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Ryan, all in favor, any discussion, all in favor? Aye. We're out of here. Wow. All right, thank you. Ryan, two, yeah.